Well, tonight we're looking at the impact of those downgrades on our daily life. Indebted South Africans had been looking forward to possible interest rate cuts, but the weaker rand makes imports more expensive. That pushes up inflation. That means that interest rates may have to go up in coming months. Earlier, Peter was looking at the warnings that the price of petrol could go up by 70 cents next month, and an agricultural economist has also warned about the knock-on effect on the price of food. Well, Wandile Sihlobo from Agbiz Research joins us now from our Pretoria studio. Thank you for being with us, Wandile. Food has been rising at double-digit rates because of the drought, but that's finally easing off. But now the downgrades, what does it mean?
No, I mean, for instance, like you said, we were starting to think that things would be fine in this year, and now the downgrade. And the key thing to really read on when you're looking at the food side is to look at the exchange rate, because what usually happens for much of the staple foods like your grains and maize meal and samp and stuff, if you see a exchange rate depreciating by 1% change, that usually leads to about 0.5% change on the grain prices, which then a quarter of that gets to be transferred on the food prices. In other words, any 1% change in the exchange rate could yield to a quarter change on the prices of food commodities, particularly the staple food ones. So I think that the easier way when one will read on this is to look at the exchange rate and really get a sense of where we are going on the food side. And I think that for some of the people, for example, us at Agbiz, which we have hoped that by the end of this year, we could see food inflation falling from the levels of 12%, which is 10%, which is currently on, to around about 6%. We might start revising that view to levels around about 8% or 7.4%, depending on what the secondary effects of the exchange rate will be on the commodities.
Yeah, that's a worrying kind of link that you're making between the currency and food prices, because if you look since the cabinet reshuffle, the rand has weakened by 11%, even though it's strengthened today, still down about 11%. So you're saying that could have a 5% change in food prices approximately if it keeps weakening like that.
Yeah, certainly. Look, if the rand gets to be weakened and then it's sustained at the weaker levels, say around about 13.9 to 14 or anything at those levels for a sustained period, say about a month or 20 days or so, then you start to see the real impact of that getting to be transferred on the commodities. And the clear picture of this is to look at the maize prices, for example, by the beginning of this week on Monday, and you're comparing to the week before on what the activity was. You see that white maize, for example, has gone up by around about 13% on a week-on-week basis, and there was nothing structurally or fundamentally that really drove the prices on that side except the exchange rate, because everything else on the supply side is solid. We are expecting a record level of maize, a record level of soybeans, and the only thing that has been supporting and keeping prices up is the weaker exchange rate. But then we will have to read on that as we look forward in the year to see what on the food side is going to be. But one little thing that I will bring on into light as well is the potential impact on this on the farmer's side, because South Africa is a country, we're importing roughly 80% of the fertilizer that we're using a year, 98% of the agrochemicals that we're using a year, and almost of the fuel, like your guest has just explained now. And now the fertilizer alone makes up about 35% of the farmer's input costs. So with all of these weaker rand and the macroeconomic factors and political factors that we are seeing, you have the farmers in the Cape that are planting wheat, about to plant, and later on in the year, depending on what the knock-off effects will be on the exchange rate, around about August, you have the guys again going back to the land and starting to look on for the next season. So all of that is going to be compounding, and I think that is going to put a pressure both on the farmer side as well as on the consumer side.
And we were talking about the fuel price. If you can explain a bit more, you've pointed out that over 80% of grain in this country is transported by road, so it has a huge impact. Are we very vulnerable? Why has that not changed? Why are we so reliant on road transport, and what is the impact?
No, I mean, look, in the 80s, you might see this when you look at the data. We used to have roughly an opposite of the situation today. 80% of our grains transported by rail, but over the years, that picture started to change. Right now, we're sitting with about 85% or so of the grains in South Africa transported by road. And what that basically means is that it means that all of our food prices gets to be exposed in any fluctuations of the rand. And that's just the grains alone. When you start now to look at the vegetables and all other food stuff, the exchange rate impacts on fuel, on the fuel side, and then the knockoff effects on that on the food prices could be significant. But at this point, I guess one would have to look at the currency on where it takes us on the next few months and really start to read on that, because I must say, even though this has happened, we have seen the rand stabilizing a little bit, not really, weakening drastically like we've seen on the previous episodes of some situations like this. So we will hope to see the next few months on what the currency is going to be. But the exposure of the food sector to the fluctuations of the rand is seriously something that people would take serious, because it does make a significant impact on our pockets.
All right, thank you very much, agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo. Well,